MPIP is speaking today with Patty Baskin. Patty is currently Executive Editor at the American Academy of Neurology and immediate past President of the Council of Science Editors. She has over 10 years' experience as an Executive Editor, and prior to that, she was a genetics researcher. She has developed numerous seminars and workshops geared towards publications professionals covering a variety of topics, including ethics. Today, Patty will be sharing her insights on predatory journals.
Patty, last spring during the annual meeting of the International Society for Medical Publication Professionals, you provided a very nice overview on questionable publishing practices, including deceptive journals, commonly referred to as predatory publishers. Today, we'd like to delve into the threats posed by predatory journals. Do you have anything you'd like to share before we get started?
I'd just like to introduce predatory journals before we get started. These are the journals that we believe don't provide the level of peer review and copy editing and distribution and this sort of thing that we think of as meeting conventional scholarly publishing standards. And often they claim false peer review. They charge publication fees similar to open access journals, and sometimes even mimic legitimate sites.
Excellent. So today we'd like to cover off on how those predatory practices affect the individuals involved in publishing research. Starting with authors, what is the biggest threat that predatory journals pose to authors?
The major threats that predatory journals pose to authors are that they obviously, because of the peer review standards that they have, they don't critique the articles well. They don't help the articles improve them at all. But they're also not distributing the articles well. Sometimes these publishers just cease to exist, and then there's no indexing at all. So the quality of the author's work is diluted, and research funds end up being wasted.
As predatory publishing practices have expanded, we've noticed that there's been an increase in the number of articles written to advise authors on how to avoid predatory journals. Yet, it seems as if predatory publishing continues to grow. If you could only give one piece of advice, what is the single most important piece of advice you have for authors on how to avoid falling into the trap of a predatory journal?
I would advise the authors to very carefully research any journals that they're considering submitting to have an ongoing dialogue with their research teams, with their supervisors and their mentors, to make sure that they're choosing the journal that is most effective and most important to indicate competency in their own field. Their own research team would be able to advise them best. And if they still need help, they should go to a science librarian who can direct them to resources to let them know whether a journal is deceptive or not.
Excellent advice. So once an author has published in a predatory journal, what course of action do you suggest that they take to withdraw their published work?
The problem with predatory journals, because you don't know whether they're even going to be there a month from now or whether they're going to even respond to you, is that there's very little you can do once you've published in a predatory journal. You may consider going to a legal system in the country you're in, but there's very little that others can help you with in the publishing field.
Will that predatory publication prevent the author from submitting their work to a legitimate journal?
Yes, this is one of the downsides of having your paper published in a predatory journal, is that most journals won't consider an article that's been pre-published, and they won't even consider looking at it because it's already in the literature. They don't want to do duplicate publication.
So to help reduce the number of submissions to predatory journals, is there anything that medical research institutions can do to encourage their authors to thoroughly vet journal credentials?
Well, it is the responsibility of research institutions to provide best practice policies for their investigators for both their research and their publication. They may want to caution faculty about taking care in choosing journals in which they publish and even develop guidelines for researchers. And as I said earlier, the mentors of these research trainees should be really mentoring them about which journals are the journals in their field that they should be publishing in.
Excellent. So switching gears a little bit, thinking of this issue from the journal perspective, what is the biggest threat that predatory journals pose to legitimate ethical journals?
The articles that predatory journals publish will dilute the literature. And when they dilute the literature, they also dilute the credibility of journals that are peer-reviewed, that are rigorously peer-reviewed. They will dilute the literature and the credibility of journals as a whole when they claim to be peer-reviewed. The scientific community and the lay community will then question the credibility of peer-reviewed journals in general.
We have observed that predatory journals are giving open access journals a bad name. Are all open access journals predatory?
Absolutely not. So our journal has two specialty journals that are open access journals. They're peer-reviewed just as rigorously as our main journal. The predatory journals have arisen in parallel to open access journals. They have a business model that can be considered similar to open access journals in that they also charge article processing fees. But that's as far as it goes. Good open access journals have rigorous peer review. They are having to compete with the predatory journals that claim to peer review and levy charges that may not be as good.
So then do predatory journals pose a threat to the advancement of medical research?
Definitely they do. When they use public funds and then the work either is not well vetted, that is, it's not peer reviewed to make sure it's accurate, or if it's not widely disseminated, scientists can either find themselves building on previous work that wasn't peer reviewed, the work wasn't done well, or perhaps if the work wasn't well disseminated, they just will not discover it and will not be able to build on it. They don't have the benefit of laying the next step in the scientific investigation.
So in closing, Patty, we wondered if there are any resources that you specifically recommend to authors and publication professionals to help them avoid predatory journals.
There are several sites out there that are especially helpful. The Committee on Publication Ethics, or the COPE website, provides some guidelines. They have a system called Think, Check, Submit that is helpful. Also, the Council of Science Editors has a statement on their website that is a cautionary statement for authors, and it lists a number of red flags to be aware of when you're evaluating a journal. And also the World Association of Medical Editors website has information to identify these types of journals.
Well, Patty, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate the insights.
Thank you very much.